أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Throughout history, there have been hundreds of epidemics all across the world, in every single continent, in every country. There were epidemics, there were viruses and illnesses that took millions of people, that caused millions of casualties. Some caused millions of casualties, some caused hundreds of thousands of casualties. But there were epidemics. In Europe, there was the Spanish flu that caused the deaths of many. In the Middle East, there were lots of epidemics. Even in the holy cities, even in the holy shrine cities, in Karbala, in Najaf, in Qazwini, there were epidemics. We see this in the books of some scholars, in their introductions to some books. They would write that we wrote this book at a time of epidemics. Sayyid Hossein Al Qazwini, who was in Baghdad, who incidentally was a jurist that became a jurist during his old age. Up till the age of 40, he was a merchant. He was a businessman. And then he decided to join the Islamic seminary, and he became a scholar of fiqh, usul al-fiqh, and rijal. And he's an example that you can be a jurist and a mujtahid and a top marja' even if you join the Islamic seminary at an old age. Because seeking knowledge is not restricted only to the youth. The hadith says, اطلب العلم من المهد إلى اللحد. Seek knowledge from cradle till grave. There was an epidemic in his time. In an introduction to one of his books, he says, I'm writing this book and there's an epidemic going on. There's a pandemic going on. In Karbala, there were several epidemics that occurred, usually by cholera. The water was unclean and it caused the deaths of many. One of them was a marja' here in Karbala. Ayatollah Sayyid Ibrahim Al Qazwini, one of our ancestors, one of our forefathers. He died at the age of 46 because of the epidemic at his time, the cholera epidemic. There have been mujtahids who died from epidemics, maraji' who died from epidemics. Even in Najaf, there were epidemics. In Mashhad, in Qom, there have always been epidemics. In Samarra, there were epidemics that killed thousands of people. However, all of them ended. None of these epidemics or pandemics or illnesses or diseases lasted forever. A day came where they ended and life went back to normal and it was business as usual. People's lives became ordinary again. People went back to work and the kids went back to school and people were able to travel and live a normal life. They all ended. My dear friends, the world has witnessed viruses and illnesses much worse than COVID-19. As dangerous as COVID-19 is But there have been worse cases, worse illnesses. The Ebola virus. The Ebola virus is extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Yet it was contained. This deadly virus, the Ebola virus, was people were able to contain this virus. And there were other illnesses where people were able to contain them, and they all ended. Perhaps the Ebola virus or other viruses, they still exist in some parts of the world, but it's not a pandemic any longer. It's not an epidemic. It's not a pandemic where the entire world has to suffer. COVID-19, my dear friends, will end. It will not remain forever. We should not assume that this crisis will last for a very long time. No matter how long it lasts, it will come to an end. And life will come back to normal. And we will go back to business as usual. That day will come. This is not going to last forever. COVID-19 is not here to remain forever. We should not lose hope in Allah. We should not reach the stage of disparity and become desperate and feel despair. We should never lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, who rescued millions of others before us, hundreds of nations and civilizations before us, He rescued them from illnesses and viruses, pandemics and epidemics, all sorts of diseases and viruses. The one who rescued those people will rescue us. The one who helped others will help us. We should never lose hope in Allah's mercy. Allah will help. وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Allah says, do not lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Allah's mercy is great. It's great. Who helped us when we're a fetus in our mother's wombs? Who was feeding us? When we were born, who got us into this life? Who put the oxygen in our lungs in the first moment that we were born? To the last moment that we live. Who's with us? Who's taking care of us? Who feeds us? Who looks after us other than Allah Azza wa Jal? We shouldn't allow COVID-19 to take our faith away. If COVID-19 has taken our wealth, our health, our loved ones, our businesses, but it should not take our faith in Allah Azza wa Jal. Our faith in Allah is priceless. We should not give it up easily. Just because we see some businesses collapse or some people fall ill and die, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, that Allah has abandoned us, that Allah has left us. We shouldn't feel despair. Allah is always there, always watching over us. It will come to an end. This pandemic, no matter how bad it is, how evil it is, it will come to an end, inshaAllah. We human beings, we despair quickly. We lack patience. We lack tolerance. We have no patience for pain. We have no patience for tests and trials. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا. Allah tells us in the Quran that human beings are created in lack of patience. We lack patience. At the slightest pain, at the slightest test, at the slightest trial, we lose hope. We begin to grieve. We start grieving. We start complaining. We lose faith. We become desperate. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. If evil touches man, he loses patience. Jazua means he loses all patience. He begins to grieve at the slightest pain, at the slightest evil. If a minor thing happens to us, we lose hope. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. But if good happens to us, we don't share it. We don't provide. We don't help. We don't provide to the ones that are less fortunate to us. This is how we are human beings. At times of evil, at bad times, we show lack of patience. In times of good, we show greed. And we don't show generosity. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. Except those who pray. Allah tells us, وَإِذَا أَنْعَمْنَا عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ أَعْرَضَ وَنَأَى بِجَانِبِهِ. If we do good to humans, they turn their backs to Allah Azza wa Jal. This is how we are. When we're doing fine, when we're healthy, when we're wealthy, when we're prosperous, we forget to pray to Allah. We give a blind eye to Allah as if we don't have a creator. We don't need to pray, we don't need to supplicate, we don't need to beg Allah Azza wa Jal because we feel independent. Who, me? I need Allah. I have my wealth, I have my health and my wealth. We forget Allah. أَعْرَضَ وَنَأَى بِجَانِبِهِ. We give our backs to Allah, we turn around. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ فَذُو دُعَاءٍ عَرِيضٍ. But once evil afflicts us, then we remember Allah. Then we come with a long dua, a list of dua with tears, by crying and tears. And this is how ungrateful we are, we human beings. We become desperate, we lose hope in Allah. Quickly we lose hope. We have no patience, we have no tolerance. At the slightest of evil, we give up. We shouldn't, my dear friends. We should have hope in Allah Azza wa Jal. No matter how bad things get, there's always Allah. Allah is taking care of us. Allah is watching over us. Allah wants the best for us more than we want the best for ourselves. Allah takes care of us more than we take care of ourselves, more than we take care of our children. Allah looks over our children. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. We are closer to Him than His jugular vein, Allah tells us. Look at the tribe of Yunus. The tribe of Yunus, Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, Allah had warned them, if they do not give up their oppression, their polytheism, their paganism, their oppression, their habits, if they don't stop, our wrath will come down. On the first day, the sky will become yellow, and then it will become red on the second day, and on the third day it will become black, and then Allah's punishment will come down on them. Yunus alayhi salam, he left them. They saw the sky turn yellow. They realized this is not a joke. The second day the sky turned red. They realized that the wrath is coming, the punishment is coming. They decided to make a change. They decided to switch and change for the better, come back to Allah Azza wa Jal. They decided to repent. Prophet Yunus alayhi salam had two companions. One was an ordinary person, the second was a scholar. When he left, the ordinary person left with him. The scholar decided to stay. Yunus told him, if Allah is punishing, you'll be punished as well. Leave the city just like I'm leaving. The alim said, no, I will remain. This is my city. This is my hometown. When the sky turned red, they came to Prophet Yunus. They didn't find him. They came to his alim, companion, the companion that was a scholar. They told him, what should we do? He said, now that you've seen the wrath, the punishment with your eyes, you've remembered to come to Allah, you have to repent. You have to seek forgiveness. Repent to Allah from what you've done. He took him out in the desert by wailing and crying and submitting to Allah, repenting to Allah. Allah lifted the punishment. Allah lifted the wrath. Yunus came back after his long journey, after his long adventure, by being swallowed by a whale and then coming back. He came back to his city, Mosul, Nainawa, which is modern day Mosul. He saw that the city has not been afflicted by punishment. He came and he asked them, they said, we repented to Allah. Allah removed the affliction. He removed the evil. Because no matter how dark the night is, my dear friends, there's always a morning coming out. The sun will rise. If we are good, Allah will be good to us. There's always hope. There's always hope. No matter how long the night is and how dark the night is, there's always a morning. The sun will always rise and the night will come to an end. The darkness will end. We should be hopeful in Allah, my dear friends. No matter how bad we feel that this situation is, we should be hopeful that this affliction will be removed. The same way that it was removed upon the people of Yunus. Allah says regarding them, فَلَوْلَا كانت قرية فلولا كانت قرية آمنت فنفعها إيمانها إلا قوم يونس لما آمنوا كشفنا عنهم عذاب الخزي في الحياة الدنيا ومتعناهم إلى حين. He said the people of Yunus, they repented, their faith had an effect on them, and we removed فكشفنا عنهم عذاب الخزي في الحياة الدنيا. We removed the punishment in dunya. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. Allah will not change the status of people lest they change themselves. Lest they change themselves. Once we start changing ourselves, Allah will change our situation. When we change, this whole mess will be over. The answer is with us, my dear friends. Some people ask, how long will COVID-19 last? How long will it last? A year, 2 years, 3 years? Is it when they find a vaccine? Is it when they find a cure? When is it that this affliction will be removed? The answer is with us. When will we change? When will we change our habits? When will we change as human beings? Allah will uplift this illness, this virus, this affliction. But there's hope, my dear friends. There should always be hope. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. No matter how dark it seems, the sun will always rise. During the days of Saddam Hussein ruled from 79 till 2003. Saddam ruled for 24 years as president. And before that, when he was vice president, he was also in charge. Saddam probably ruled for over 30 years, 32 years, from the days that he was vice president until his fall in 2003. People were giving up. People lost hope that Saddam will stay in power forever, this regime. And if he leaves, his son will come back. His son will be in power. And if his son dies, his son will come to power. No one ever thought that Hizb al-Ba'ath, the Ba'ath party in Iraq, would leave, would fall, would end. Millions of people died. Millions of people suffered at the hands of Saddam. How many people died in the Iran-Iraq war? How many people died in Halabja, in north of Iraq? How many scholars and ulama did Saddam Hussein murder and massacre? Only from the family of Al-Hakim, there are over 50 martyrs. From the family of Bahr al-Ulum, there are over 50 martyrs. Most of them were young. Most of them were youth. They left their wives and children. They left their widows and orphans. No one thought that a day will come where Saddam would leave. Saddam would fall. Saddam would have to go. But we saw that day. Allah let us witness that day. The day that his statue fell and he fell and they found him in that hole. In such a humiliating way. Saddam was found. And Saddam was hanged. Saddam was punished for his crimes. And his children were punished for their crimes. And his party were punished for their crimes. Because there's always hope. After a long night, the day will come. No matter how dark the night is, the sun will rise. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who came with ISIS, who took over Mosul and several cities in Iraq and cities in Syria, this ruthless, oppressive, barbaric terrorist organization. They took over. When Mosul fell, Iraqis lost hope that half of Iraq was taken. A third of Iraq has been taken by a terrorist group, and they were very close to taking over Baghdad and Karbala and Najaf, and they had vowed to take over Karbala and Najaf. And they would call Najaf al-Ashrak. Najaf is Najaf al-Ashraf. They call it Najaf al-Ashrak. Karbala al-Muqaddasa. They call them Karbala al-Munajjasa. But we saw what happened to them. We saw what happened to ISIS. We saw what happened to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Because there's always hope. This tells us that we human beings should never lose hope. Never lose hope. No matter how bad the situation is, it will end. A day will come where all of this will be over, it will be history. It will be stories for us to tell our children and grandchildren. A day will come, insha'Allah, insha'Allah. A day will come, we will tell our grandchildren about COVID-19, about this crisis, when the world went into pause, when the economy collapsed, when people were dying, when a tiny virus that cannot be seen with the naked eye put the world in pause, in a pause. And the world stood still. Life stopped. Everyone remained at home. 7 billion people on earth are on lockdown. This will become a story. It will become history. History is his story. Our story will become history. We will tell our children, we will tell our grandchildren of what we saw. It will end, insha'Allah, because Allah tells us, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. With difficulty shall come ease. See, Allah doesn't mention this verse once, He mentions it twice. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. With difficulty will come ease. With difficulty will come ease. A reminder, it's not random that this verse is mentioned twice. Allah doesn't do things randomly. The Quran is eloquent. Every verse in the Quran, every word in the Quran has a meaning. It's there for a purpose. When Allah mentions this verse twice, that with difficulty shall come ease. With difficulty shall come ease. We should never lose hope. We should never give up. Look at Hiroshima. Hiroshima, my dear friends, was bombed with a nuclear bomb. We all know this. We've all read history. We've all read about World War II. We all know what happened, what the United States of America did to Hiroshima. They dropped the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima. But what happened? 1 month after Hiroshima, after the nuclear bomb was thrown at Hiroshima and everyone was killed, the entire city was destroyed. After a month, they had a school running. There was a running school. There were teachers and students. Maybe 2-3 teachers. Maybe 2-3 students. But there was a school. There was hope. There was a will to live and to rebuild civilization. They did it. Go look at Hiroshima today. Hiroshima is an example for hope. It's an example that people should not despair, that people could rewrite history again and stand on their feet and build their civilization again, as the people of Hiroshima did. They got back on their feet and they rebuilt their city. And today, Hiroshima is one of the most beautiful cities in Japan. It's one of the most modern cities in Japan. And they celebrate or they commemorate the bombing of Hiroshima every year so that they will never forget. It becomes part of their history. This is how they make use of history. An incident that is negative, it's an evil point in their history, but they make it into something positive. It gave them the will and the determination to start new, to start fresh. And that's what they did. We have to have hope, my dear friends. COVID-19 should not get the best of us. It should not destroy our determination and our will to live and to achieve and to prosper and to live our ordinary lives. Not at all. We should develop the will to do good and to overcome this virus if we work together. If we work together, put our minds together and our hands in each other's hands, we'll be able to overcome this virus, this problem, this pandemic. But if we wish to fight one another, if we wish to call it the Chinese virus, and be so racist in not owning our own problems, but blaming it on the Chinese or blaming it on so-and-so, we won't get anywhere. If we have this racist mentality, we won't be able to overcome the problem. If we work together, if we put our minds together and our hands together, we'll be able to overcome There's not a problem that we can't overcome. Look at Europe. Europe, European countries had wars and battles for over 1,000 years. For thousands of years, European countries fought one another, killed one another, waged wars against one another. England and France, France and Germany, Germany and Italy. There were wars, there were battles, there were bloodshed. There was a war called the 100 Years' War. You've read about it in history, in school. 100 Years' War. They fought for 100 years. World War I, World War II. This all occurred in Europe. World War II was in Europe. England and France against Germany and Italy. And the United States got involved. And other countries got involved. This all happened in the past 100 years. World War II happened in the last 100 years. It hasn't been a century for World War II to pass. But look at Europe today, united. They overcame their past, this ugly past, this depressing, tragic past. They were able to overcome this past. Now they're united. Now there's a European Union. They act like one country, one continent, with one currency, with one visa, with one foreign policy. They have similar domestic policies. They work as one nation, one group, one civilization. They put their past behind them and they're willing to work together. This gives us hope. This gives us hope that we can overcome our past. We can overcome COVID-19. There's nothing that human beings cannot overcome. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the help of Allah, with His help and His guidance and His mercy, we can overcome any disaster, any catastrophe, any pandemic, any challenge. We could do it. However, my dear friends, a day will come that COVID-19 will be history. It will be history. We will be able to overcome COVID-19. However, it should not be forgotten. We should not forget where we were and what we had to go through. We should not forget this challenge. We should not forget this trial and test. Unfortunately, we human beings, we tend to forget our past. We tend to forget the exams and trials and tribulations that we went through. As soon as we feel safe, as soon as good happens to us, we forget the past. We forget the challenges and obstacles that we had to go through in order to reach this stage. We should never forget, my dear friends. The Quran tells us, وَلَئِنْ أَذَقْنَاهُ نَعْمَاءَ بَعْدَ ضَرَّاءَ مَسَّتْهُ لَيَقُولَنَّ ذَهَبَ السَّيِّئَاتُ عَنِّي إِنَّهُ لَفَرِحٌ فَخُورٌ. Allah tells us about mankind that when we lift the affliction, lift the evil from him, after he was in trials and tribulations, we lift the trial and tribulations, now he's good. He says, I'm fine, I'm safe. لَيَقُولَنَّ ذَهَبَ السَّيِّئَاتُ عَنِّي. He'll say, no more evil for me. Evil will no longer afflict me. Now I'm safe. I'm on the safe side now. إِنَّهُ لَفَرِحٌ فَخُورٌ. Now he's arrogant, he's happy. He thinks he's done it, he's achieved. He thinks it's all about him. He did it on his own. He forgot the role of Allah in helping him overcome the challenge. We will forget the role of Allah in helping us overcome the challenge of COVID-19. We should not forget, my dear friends. We should not forget the hundreds of thousands that are dying and the hundreds of thousands of others that had to go through the pain of the coronavirus, who were hospitalized, who saw death with their own eyes and were about to die. We should not forget. Why? Because these tests, these exams, these trials and tribulations, they're reminders. They remind us, they help remind us of who we are. That we human beings were weak. And we are in need of Allah Azza wa Jal. So that we do not become arrogant. So that we remain humble servants of Allah. But if we forget these trials and tribulations, Allah will send us a second reminder, and a third reminder, and a fourth reminder. It's like setting setting your alarm clock. When you set your alarm clock and you press snooze, you didn't wake up. When you press snooze, what will happen? The alarm will go off after 5 minutes, or 6 minutes, or 7 minutes. If you press snooze again, it will set again and again and again until you wake up. Allah's reminders are the same, my dear friends. Today it's COVID-19. Tomorrow will be something else. Lest we wake up, we have to wake up. If we wake up, we will be safe. But if we keep on snoozing, we keep on going back to sleep, and we don't wake up, we don't open our eyes, we don't realize what we're doing on this earth. We don't realize what we're doing in this dunya, what we're doing unto others, the evil that we afflict on others, starting from our family members to other countries, as nations. We afflict evil on others as individuals, as families, as groups, as political groups, as nations. We harm others. We're not careful. We're not careful of our deeds. Thus, there will always be reminders. And reminders don't come in an email. Allah won't send us an email telling us, wake up. A reminder has to be harsh, has to wake us up. A reminder will come in the form of a pandemic or epidemic. It'll come in the form of a disease or a virus. We have to be careful. وَلَئِنْ أَذَقْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنَّا مِنْ بَعْدِ ضَرَّاءَ مَسَّتْهُ لَيَقُولَنَّ هَذَا لِي وَمَا أَظُنُّ السَّاعَةَ قَائِمَةً. Allah says, when we lift affliction from a human being and we do good for him, he will say, this is me, this is mine, I did this. وَمَا أَظُنُّ السَّاعَةَ قَائِمَةً. And I don't think Judgment Day is anytime close. This is how we human beings think. We don't think that it's over, this is it. Even now, at the time of COVID-19, we think that others might catch the virus, but we don't think it's us. I'm not going to catch the virus. Maybe my neighbor, maybe others. I'm not going to fall ill. It's not going to happen to me until it happens. I'm not going to lose a family member until it happens, because we're arrogant. As soon as evil is away from us, we think we're safe. We think that COVID-19 is the final test. Allah is not going to test me again. He's not going to test my faith again. No, He will, again and again and again. أَوَلَا يَرَوْنَ أَنَّهُمْ يُفْتَنُونَ فِي كُلِّ عَامٍ مَرَّةً أَوْ مَرَّتَيْنِ. Do they not see that they are tested every year once or twice? Allah tests us once, twice, thrice, every year. Allah tests us. Unfortunately, we're very ungrateful. We're forgetful. We're forgetful. We forget that we had an obstacle to face. We had a problem to face. We had a pandemic to face. We just overcame a pandemic. We're very forgetful. Thus, we end up going back to our old ways. Will be business as usual. We lived a life of sin and we'll go back to sinning. We lived a life of oppression and we'll go back to oppressing. We lived a life of usury, taking interest, exploiting the poor, the rich becoming richer, the poor becoming poor. We'll go back to our old ways. Allah tells us about a group. It's not a story of a certain group. It's our story. It's my story and your story. It's all of us. Of a group who were in the ocean. They were in a ship. They were on a ship. A storm hit them. A storm, a very fierce storm, hit those that were on the ship. And they were about to drown. So they began to pray to Allah and to beg Him to rescue them and bring them back to land. And they told Him, once you bring us back to land, we'll be good people. We'll worship you. We'll fix what we've broken with people, with others. But as soon as Allah rescues them, they go back to their old ways. فإذا ركبوا في الفلك دعوا الله مخلصين له الدين فلما نجاهم إلى البر إذا هم يشركون. Once Allah rescues them, once the storm subsides, the rainstorm, the storm in the middle of the ocean with the large waves, thinking that we're about to drown, once everything goes back to normal, the waves subside, the storm subsides, they go back to to their ordinary life. They go back to drinking and partying and go back to disobeying Allah. Go back to obeying shaitan, worshipping shaitan. This is our story, my dear friends. This is my story and your story and the story of every human being. As soon as we hear of affliction, we remember Allah. Someone is told he has cancer, he starts praying to Allah. Before that, he didn't know who Allah is. Him and Allah were strangers. But as soon as he hears that there's cancer, the sea of cancer, he begins to pray, he begins to worship, he begins to supplicate, he begins to make amends with Allah. As soon as he's solved, as soon as he's cured, he goes back to his old ways. It's as if there was no cancer. It's as if he wasn't dying. This is how we are. We have short memories. Our short-term memory is very small. It's very short. It's very short. This is our problem, my dear friends. But we should know that after COVID-19, there will be viruses. There will be trials. There will be tests. This is not over. This is not the end, my dear friends. This is the sad reality. Insha'Allah, we will be able to overcome COVID-19. But it's not the end. It's not the end. There will be trials. It depends on us. Will we change? Allah will change. What does that mean, Allah will change? Allah will change in how He deals with us. Allah will no longer afflict us with evil because we've changed. It's like a person who has the desire to lose weight. If they have lost those 20 pounds or 20 kilos, that's it. They don't need to lose more weight. But if they don't, they have to keep on losing weight. They have to keep on exercising. They have to keep on running. Allah wants to see, do we reach that goal of being good human beings the way that He wants us? We'll be safe. If not, there will be new trials and new tests every day. My dear things, my dear brothers and sisters, my dear friends, we have to change. We have to change. You know, I'm sure most of us have talked about this, that when COVID-19 ends, what are we going to do? What's the first thing that we're going to do? I'm sure I've asked my friends have asked us, you've asked your friends. We've all talked about it. When COVID-19 ends, what's the first thing that we're going to do? Some say I'm going to go on a road trip. Some say I'm going to go on vacation. Some say I'm going to go on ziyarah. Others say I'm going to go to my favorite restaurant. Others say I'm going to visit my family members. We all have a list of priorities, what we want to do when COVID-19 is over. Some say I want to go to Disneyland. I want to go swim in the beach. We need to have another list, my dear friends, of real priorities. Going on a vacation is good. Go on that vacation. You want to go on ziyarah? Perfect. Go on ziyarah. You want to visit family members? The first thing that you want to do? Good. But there's another list of priorities. Number one, my dear friends, we have to make a decision to never be silent about oppression again. If there's anything we should take home, never be silent about oppression. If there's anything we could learn from Imam Hussein, is not to be silent. Speak up. You see evil, speak up. You see oppression, speak up. You see munkar, speak up. Remain silent for too long. Look at Yemen. This country that we should be spending billions on its infrastructure. We're spending billions in bombing that country. And the entire world was silent. If one country was guilty of bombing Yemen, there's 150 other countries that are guilty of being silent. They didn't speak up. Look at Burma. Look at Myanmar and the Muslims there being oppressed by Buddhist extremists. Look at China and the Muslims that are being oppressed by the Chinese government. We shouldn't be silent, my dear friends. Oppression brings punishment. Oppression and being silent over oppression will bring punishment. Just like the people of Thamud. When that wretched man killed the camel, Allah punished everyone. He punished everyone. It was only one person who killed the camel. But it was everyone who remained silent, and everyone had to pay the price. فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ. Allah says we punish them for their crime, plural, not singular. Because by remaining silent, we are just as guilty as those that are oppressing. 2, we should make it a priority for ourselves not to oppress others. A husband should not oppress his wife. A wife should not oppress her husband. Parents should not oppress their children. Children should not oppress their parents. We should not oppress our neighbors, our employees, our co-workers, our friends, our community members. No to oppression. We should not be oppressive ourselves. Number 3, we should come back to Allah. We should remember that this life is not the end. We are here in transit. It's just like those who travel to Istanbul to go to their countries. You're in Istanbul for a short period amount of time, 5 hours, 6 hours, or you transit in London, or you transit in Dubai. You're there for a couple of hours. You're not there to stay. You're not going to purchase a house in a city where you're transiting for 5 hours. We are not here to stay, my dear friends. We are here to leave. We are here to work and plant for the akhirah. In dunya, we are gardeners and we are planting. We will see the seeds in the akhirah. We will see the fruits in the akhirah. It's not worth it to live a life of sin, to live a life of disobedience to Allah, to live in a bubble, to think that it's this life and that's it. There's nothing after dunya. Number 4, let's make a decision to never keep our mosques empty and our Islamic centers empty. Look at us. Look at us. The night of Ashura, and we're sitting at home. We have to hear a majlis online. We cannot be at our mosques. We cannot be at the Husseiniya. We took our Husseiniyyas for granted. We took our Islamic centers for granted. We should never keep our mosques empty. How many times did we keep our mosques empty throughout the year? Thursday nights, Friday, Salatul Jum'ah, Ramadan. We kept our mosques empty. Look at where we are today. In this blessed month, the month of Muharram, our Husseiniyyas are empty. There's no majlis in our Husseiniyyas. Let's make a decision never to keep our mosques empty. Never to take our mosques for granted. Ramadan, Muharram, on the weekends, Thursday nights, Fridays, youth sessions, Saturday and Sunday schools. Let's keep our mosques busy. Let's make use of our mosques. In fact, number 5, we should not take anything for granted. Nothing, even the smallest things. Seeing your parents, embracing your parents, hugging your parents should not be taken for granted. Going on ziyarah should not be taken for granted. Coming for arba'een. Arba'een is right around the corner. Will we have the opportunity to participate in arba'een as we did in the previous years? We took it for granted. Perhaps this year we will not be able to participate in arba'een due to the pandemic. We shouldn't take it for granted. Don't take anything for granted. Traveling, going on a walk in a park, visiting relatives, visiting family, friends. None of it should be taken for granted. This should be a lesson, number 6, this should be a lesson for the big corporations that exploited the poor, that exploited people, only to make themselves richer and add billions to their billions. Look at these big corporations, big airlines, hotel companies that were making billions. Now they're losing. Now they're announcing their bankruptcy. This should be a lesson not to exploit anyone, not to make billions at the cost of whom? At the cost of the poor. The rich only get richer and the poor only get poorer. This should be a lesson. When the stock market plummets, when the economy crashes, and when companies are forced to announce bankruptcy, this should be a lesson for us for the future, to fix our problems, to reform ourselves, to change ourselves, to better ourselves, be better human beings as individuals, as families, as organizations, as corporations, as nations. If anything, we should learn that COVID-19 came to reform us, to change us, It came to change us as human beings, to reform us. The idea was to reform. Just like Imam Hussein alayhi salam. When he rose, his agenda was not to gain power. It was not to attain power, to put himself on the throne, just because it's power. Imam Hussein rose for reform. If Imam Hussein saw that this ummah was going in a different track, just like today, just like before COVID-19, we're going in a different direction. We're not going in the direction of akhirah. All of us collectively as human beings, we're corrupted. We're being corrupt. We're going in a different direction. So too was the ummah during the time of Rasulullah, during the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. It was going in a different direction. Imam Hussein wanted to steer the ummah back on its tracks. Put it back on its tracks. He said, إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي. I have rose to seek reform in the nation of my grandfather. أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر. I want to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. This was the goal of Imam Hussein, to reform this ummah, to reform the people of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. That's why he had his sacrifices, all of these sacrifices that Imam Hussein performed. His companions, his family members, this was all part of his reform. Imam Hussein started with his family, with his friends in this movement. Imam Hussein offered all that he had for the sake of Allah. His brother Abu al-Fadl, his eldest son Ali al-Akbar, his nephew Al-Qasim, his nephews, his companions, the best of his companions. Habib ibn Mudahar, Muslim ibn Awsaja, Zuhair ibn al-Qayn. But he wanted to offer one more sacrifice. When you take a bouquet of flowers, you put the nicest flower on top so that it looks nice. The bouquet of flowers looks nice, it looks acceptable. Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Ashura, he offered a bouquet of flowers for the sake of Allah. But he wanted to put a last, final flower, a small flower on the bouquet. It was his son, Abdullah. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was about to enter the battlefield to fight. His sister Zainab comes to him. She says, Akhi Aba Abdullah, your son is dying from thirst. Get a drop of water for your child. Imam Hussein puts down his armor, his sword. He goes out without carrying a weapon. He goes to the army. He says, my O Shi'at al Abi Sufyan, if I have committed a crime against you, what crime has this baby committed? The enemy soldiers, they huddle. One says, let us shoot him. Another says, let us give him water. The other said, don't give him water. They began to debate as what to do. Umar bin Sa'd looked at Harmala. He said, Ya Harmala, اقطع نزاع القوم. Ya Harmala, end the debate. Harmala knew that Umar bin Sa'd is telling him, make a kill, shoot your arrow. He said, Al-walid am al-walad, who do you want me to shoot, the father or the son? Umar bin Sa'd, he told him, Ama tara bayad nahr al-tifl, do you not see the white neck of the child? Meaning, go for the child, go for the infant. Harmala says that on the day of Ashura, I shot 3 arrows. One landed in the chest of Aba Abdullah. The second landed in the eye of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. But the one that broke my heart was the arrow that landed in the neck of Abdullah. It pierced through one side and it came out the other. Abdullah started struggling. He took out his hands from his cloth. Then blood started gushing from his neck. Imam Hussein alayhi salam put his hand underneath the neck of Abdullah. He collected the blood and threw it to the sky. And he said, هَوَّنَ مَا نَزَلَ بِي أَنَّهُ بِعَيْنِ اللَّهِ. What has happened to me, what has befallen upon me is in the eyes of Allah. This brings me comfort. Imam Hussein alayhi salam carried back the child back to the tent, not knowing what to say to his mother, Rabab. Imam Hussein alayhi salam kept on going back and forth. What should I tell his mother, Rabab? What should I tell his sister, Sukaina? What should I tell his aunt, Zainab? When he came back, his daughter Sukaina greeted him. أبا أبا هل سقيت أخي الماء وهل بقي من الماء شيء? Did you quench the thirst of my brother, and is there any water remaining? Imam Hussein took out Abdullah and he said, Haki akhaki madbuha. Take your brother, he has been slain. Your brother is slain. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العلي الأعظم الأعز الجل الأكرم يا الله. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته، ولا هما إلا فرجته، ولا عيبا إلا سترته، ولا خوفا إلا أمنته، ولا رزقا إلا بسطته، ولا شملا إلا جمعته، ولا مرضا إلا شفيته، ولا غائبا إلا حفظته وأدنيته، ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة لك فيها رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين. ولأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات نقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.